that you have the entire European Commission led by the President Ursula von der Leyen in India in a 21-member delegation. Those viewers are live visuals of her meeting External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar. She is in India along with her entire commission to try and thrash out a trade deal between India and the EU. The College of Commissioners haven't travelled outside of Europe. This is a first. It comes at a time, on a day, frankly, when the US has imposed 25% tariffs on the EU. It also comes at a time when many within the EU are saying that the European Union needs to focus more on growth rather than regulation. So what will be the contours of a possible trade deal between India and EU is something that we'll keep a close watch on. Along with that, will there be greater alignment in terms of areas related to defense, areas related to broader policy towards the Indo-Pacific? Will there be greater alignment on areas related to technology? All that is something that we will keep a very close watch for you. Let's quickly now get in my colleague Mohammad Ghazali, who's joining me live and keeping a close watch on this meeting. Talk to us, Ghazali, about what is likely to happen in this meeting.
Entire meeting and the delegation which has come with the EU Commissioner President, this could not have come at a better time with the changing geopolitical situation, with US President threatening tariffs to every other country. It's changing its stance on the Ukraine-Russia war. EU perhaps feels it's more in isolation, and that is why it is looking for more reliable partner. Now, why India? The EU Commissioner President also tweeted about after landing in Delhi that India is a very trusted partner, a reliable partner in the Indo-Pacific region. And it is also becoming very significant due to the fact that on one side, you are getting these tariff threats from the new Trump administration. China is also expanding its economic space as well, and that is why European Union sees India, which is going to be the third largest economy by 2030, as a big market. And India, what we see that for EU, India serves both as an important export market and a crucial sources of goods. European industries, particularly in automobiles, wines and spirits, see India as an essential destination amid increasing global protectionism. So besides the trade ties which we are talking about, because EU has always been the largest trading partner for India, and also amid all this tariff threat, they really want some reliable partner like India, which is also going to be a bigger economy. And India, being one of the bigger markets, gives that space to EU to come and invest here. One important point which the External Affairs Ministry as well as Indian government is looking for this incoming delegation is the Make in India campaign. India is looking for these European companies to come and invest here, and there will be trade council meeting between India and EU Commission of Trade, where they will talk about clean energy, space technology, defense sector, and there will be different and new avenues which will be explored by both parties to get into an agreement for trade. As far as investment is concerned, it was spoken to a senior EU official also whether there will be any announcement of investment. So they told that this entire delegation actually designs a framework for investment, but they will not announce any investment immediately. But after meeting different ministries, perhaps later EU can announce some investment proposal as well.
Absolutely. In fact, Ghazali, you also spoke a short while back with the representatives of Belgium. Let's play that conversation out.
So I'm joined here by the ambassador of Belgium, and we are going to talk about the big Belgian economic mission which is visiting India. Thanks for speaking to NDTV, sir. In the press briefing, you just spoke about a gamut of issues which will be discussed when this commission comes. What will be the key focus areas besides the Belgium chocolate and we see the trade, it's expanding over the years, but what would be the main focus since the princess is also leading this delegation?
So indeed, as you mentioned, we have a classical Belgian-Indian cooperation in the chemical sector, in logistics, in port cooperation, etc. This mission is bringing all these companies, of course. We have 330 delegates, but we are really also focusing on strategic sectors, the sectors of the future: renewable energy, life sciences, space, defense, eco-construction. So that will be really the focus, and we're bringing top-notch companies that are already present here, but also companies that are coming for the first time to India. And as you know, of course, export and investment are really very much linked. So export can drive investment on the mid and long term.
Okay, coming to the defense sector, what would be the key focus areas when it comes to investment? As you rightly pointed out that Prime Minister has spoken about Make in India campaign. Can we see some more investment from the Belgian companies in the defense sector coming over here in India?
You will see that in the mid and in the long term, we have a number of companies that are really involved, heavily involved in big projects, defense projects here. There will be a number of signings. It is at the signing ceremony because many of these companies are on the stock exchange, so I cannot really go into detail. But at the signing ceremony, we can tell more. But you will see some progress in this area for sure.
All right. So that, of course, was reflecting part of the sentiment that EU is having when it comes to why it wants to collaborate more with India. And in fact, that's one of the questions that I'm putting forth today as part of the big questions that we put out on India Global. First up, amid the US-EU tensions, which way will India tilt? Remember, there is now everything now exists in a larger trade environment that India and the world is existing in, and we cannot ignore that. That's the first key question that we are putting forth. The second question, viewers, is that will India actually lower tariffs on wine, on cars, on several other specific areas and goods that have been pointed out by the EU? That remains to be seen, because these are trade negotiations. It's not just about, you come here, you get a sweet deal. What is in it for India for it to lower tariffs? And the third thing, which is what we're asking, is that what are really the challenges? This is now an ongoing process which has gone on for a fairly long period of time. It was in cold storage for about a decade, has been revived the last 2 years. What really are the challenges that lie ahead? Which brings the last question that we can put out on the screen is that also beyond trade, what else is the key areas that Delhi-Brussels relationship can focus on? Will it be defense? Will it be common meeting of minds when it comes to how they view China? Indo-Pacific, technology, what are those other areas in terms of a broader relationship between India and the EU? And let's put some of those questions out to, in fact, Mr. Waghmar, who's a research fellow, School of Oriental and African Studies, or SOAS, in London. Joining me on the broadcast is also Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty, former secretary at the MEA. All right, in fact, let me start with you, Mr. Waghmar. What, according to you, could be the focus areas when it comes to these discussions and these important trade talks between India and the EU?
May I take up with your last question the larger gamut of issues between New Delhi and Brussels and the geostrategic aspects? Trade talks, of course, are behind doors, and the nitty-gritty will be hammered out as we can eventually see. Suffice to note that talks commenced between India and the EU for an FTA agreement in 2007. It was in abeyance and has been kick-started since 2022. Concomitantly, of course, your viewers must also realize that India has been in FTA talks with Oman, the GCC, which is a very salient partner, and more on that in a moment with the EU factor I will tie in, as well as with Canada, which of course has been in abeyance for a variety of political reasons, and also with Australia, on which there has been a partial trade treaty signed between New Delhi and Canberra. Now, coming to the geostrategic aspects, what would New Delhi seek from the EU? Ever since this Indo-EU cooperation agreement was commenced and Indo-EU relations crystallized in 1994 as a point of historic background to your viewers. And 12 India-EU summits have taken place to date. Firstly, I would envisage the following. India will press the EU for reform at the UN Security Council and a permanent seat. Secondly, also both share the anti-terrorism agenda and foreseeing what would materialize at the UN, namely a comprehensive convention on terrorism, hybrid warfare, and strategic threats that they both face. And speaking of threats, of course, as far as the EU and European theater is concerned, it is Putin's Russia,
right,
on which, of course, India does not necessarily see. But, of course, this has to be pointed out that the Europeans do realize India, due to its own so-called strategic considerations, has a robust trade relation with Russia, and it has not necessarily affected EU policies and investments so far in India? And finally, on the you must note that India and the European Union both are IMEC founding partners, which was conceived in September
Indeed.
2023. The Indo-Middle East European corridor, which
Yes.
runs from Nhava Vashi, New Bombay to Marseille via Haifa and Rome, along other corridors
Indeed.
to Abu Dhabi and Dammam. So India is keen on that aspect, Gaurie, for the simple reason.
Absolutely.
that
Hold your
this
thought there, sir. Hold your
north-south
thought there. I'm
corridor-
going to come back. I know that's an important aspect, and I'm going to deal with IMEC in just a bit. But let me quickly now get in also Mr. Chakravarty on this, which is the nitty-gritties. We spoke about the big picture in terms of the India-EU relationship, but Mr. Chakravarty, it also comes down to the trade relationship, doesn't it? Because it comes at a time when there's so much of uncertainty around the world, given how America is now revisiting all trade relationships.
Well, we must understand why this geopolitical moment has occurred. And that is because, obviously, because what Trump is trying to do, which is like unraveling the WTO, the World Trade Organization, which had set the rules and the agenda for international trade for several decades now. And this factor of unraveling the WTO began actually earlier than Trump, because the American administration before him, even during the other three presidents, Democratic presidents, were putting roadblocks in various issues in WTO, like the dispute settlement mechanism, for example, where countries take their disputes and then accept the verdict of that mechanism, the settlement mechanism. So we have been watching this, and Trump has of course come and speeded up the process in the sense that he's added various other things like reciprocal tariffs and things. So this is the reason why the other major trading partners, EU and India particularly, EU is India's largest trading partner, are now naturally reaching out to each other, and there is some urgency in trying to find other arrangements that can help them continue their trading relationship and increase investment and other aspects, not just trade and economy.
Exactly.
But defense, technology, movement of skilled people and all that. So this is why it is happening now. It has received a boost because of what Trump is doing.
Absolutely. Mr. Chakravarty, then let me ask you this as a follow-up before I get into the other speaker as well. In terms of, you pointed out that it's not just about trade talks, it's also about big ticket investments that India wants to attract, the EU also wants to attract. Where do you see the alignment on these areas actually being, the focus areas, the focus sectors that could be?
Look, Europe and India have had a long years of engagement in terms of trade and industry. Now, let's take the Make in India, the plan of the Indian government. Now, it is not make everything in India. It is basically make things in India with inputs, supply chains that cover Europe as well, or any other country. So I think those are some of the areas where the European companies can come in. And if Trump has threatened to put 25% tariff, increase 25% tariff on European products. Now that will really, hurt the Europeans. And the Europeans, when they put 25% reciprocal tariff, which they have threatened to do, will again, basically drive their trade into a decline. So where will they go? India is the largest market, the largest country, the fastest growing economy. And then there is the strategic aspect of it, which is the Indo-Pacific. Now the Europeans are also worried about China, how China is cornering all the trade. China has 35% manufacturing capacity in the world today. And
exactly.
how to deal with China? We are also grappling with the same problem. And how to increase trade with China, because China is a controlled economy and it's an authoritarian state which puts in lots of barriers on trade with other countries. So I think these are some of the issues that they can discuss.
Yes.
And defense also is an area where we have had long-standing relations with France, Germany, UK, Italy, with some of the larger countries. Even
absolutely.
Other countries like Austria. There are in terms of military hardware. And there again, they can collaborate. because India wants to produce many of these items here, or at least partially produce, and source, various
and address some of
parts.
its domestic needs and aspirations when it comes to defense manufacturing. Mr. Waghmar, then let me come back to the other issue, which was about IMEC, an issue and a project that the Prime Minister also referred to the last time he was in France earlier this month. He raised it with President Macron as well. How do you see that project now developing going forward, given that it impacts not just Indian interests, but also, of course, boosts European interests?
Well, the IMEC, as I pointed out, conceived in September 2023, of which India, US, and the European Union are founding partners, besides, of course, the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And also, individually speaking, France, Italy, and Germany. And as you've correctly put on the map, it starts from New Bombay, Vashi, to Jebel Ali, but also to Khalifa Port in next door Abu Dhabi, besides Dubai, all the way to Haifa in Israel, Piraeus in Greece. Rome has also to be shown on the map, which has not been done, and finally Marseille. Now, that holds immense promise and import because it is a counter-narrative to the Belt and Road investment, which has been put out in recent years. And also when the IMEC was announced, President Erdogan of Turkey expressed his displeasure too, and has now talked about the so-called Iraq-Baghdad road, the so-called Baghdad-Istanbul link, which goes back to the early 20th century with the Ottomans. But let's leave that aside for a moment. The point is, this will be of considerable signification to India for two reasons. Firstly, I must point out quite bluntly that the INSTC, the so-called North-South Corridor, which was conceived in 2000 to run between, again, New Bombay, Vashi, and St. Petersburg via Bandar Abbas, Baku, and Astrakhan, all the way up to the Baltic Sea, reaching Russia, is quite frankly not going anywhere. It is a corridor to nowhere on which I have even published. Because for the fact that Iran is not just going to feel the heat of Trump's sanctions, it already is, but because the rail lines and channels and arteries in question have not been laid by Armenia in the last 20 years. Kazakhstan is also facing a threat from Russia because Russia is eyeing up white Russian nationalist lands in northern Kazakhstan. Armenia and Azerbaijan are locked in a conflict, which they were even at the time of the SCO summit in September 22, when Modi was in Samarkand.
Right.
Tajikistan had a problem with Kyrgyzstan.
Indeed.
This is not going anywhere as such. The only saving grace India could do, and which has done recently, because it was again in the pipeline, is the Madras-Vladivostok corridor, which has seen some trade recently. Because India
I'm afraid I'll have to leave it there. This is not just about IMEC, but it's about one of the areas where the India and the EU come together. But fascinating conversation. We're going to continue this maybe at another time. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for speaking to me on India Global.